Hello, I hope you're having a magical day so far. This week I'm going to show you how to create painted rat fridge magnets. I have 3 pet rats who I love dearly, and I wanted to create something to honor the impact they've had in my life. This is a technique that can certainly be used for any pet or any painting for that matter, so even if you don't have rats, you can still make your own personalized magnets. You will need bakeable Sculpey or polymer clay, an X-Acto knife or box cutter, acrylic paints and small paintbrushes, Mod Podge Dimensional Magic, 2 magnets for each piece that you make, and super glue or hot glue. The first thing we are going to do is draw out our designs. I've already drawn Mr. Tickles, so now I'm going to draw Tofu, who's my Rex rat. When drawing rats, think of them in the shape of 2 circles. There's the big circle, which is the body, and then the small circle, which is the head. You can draw these out first if you like, and then add the details. Other features of rats include triangular-shaped faces, circular ears, and long snake-like tails that taper off into a thinner structure. Thinking of drawing in terms of general shapes can help when trying to get the correct dimensions. For wrinkles, they aren't just lines across the body, they protrude out from the profile of the rat, creating these little bumps that tend to appear in clusters. Wrinkles tend to be harder to draw and paint, but I find it fun making my rat look like a raisin. Next, we are going to cut out each of the rats, leaving a bit of paper around them. Although you can certainly cut them out entirely, since they have such long and thin tails, the clay would be much more likely to break if it fell or was roughly handled. Plus, I want to be able to write each of their names onto the magnets, and leaving some space allows me to do just that. Taking the polymer clay, we're going to roll it out flat to about 1/4 of an inch thickness. If you don't have a rolling pin, you can use a thick pen or other cylindrical shaped item. Place each of your drawings onto the clay and then cut them out using a sharp tool. X-Acto knives work best, but I only had a box cutter on hand, so that's what I ended up using. Make sure that you're holding down the drawing so that it doesn't slide around and mess up the shape of what's cut out from the clay. Smooth out any rough edges on the piece using your fingers. When you first cut them out, they definitely will not look like rats, but that's okay because we are just going for a general shape. The magic really happens once we start painting. Now I'm going to transfer the clay onto a baking sheet and then bake them at 275 degrees Fahrenheit for about 25 minutes. Let them cool completely and they should be totally hardened. Now I'm going to use a transferring method that I learned from an art professor many years ago. If you've already created a drawing and you want to transfer it onto something else but you don't have transfer paper, you can color in the backside of the drawing entirely with a pencil and then trace over your initial drawing on top of whatever you want to transfer the image onto. This works best for smaller drawings, but for the purpose of this project it works out great. Just make sure that you hold or tape the drawing onto the piece of clay so that the image doesn't move around and mess up your transfer. If the lines turn out soft, you can always draw over them to make them bolder. Now, this isn't necessary, but if you want to smooth out any rough edges, you can take some sandpaper to the edges of the clay. Just make sure that you're wearing a mask so that you don't inhale any clay particles. Okay, now's the fun part, which is painting. My favorite acrylic paints are Liquitex Heavy Body, but honestly any cheap acrylic paint from the craft store will work for this project. If you are a first-time buyer of acrylics, all you really need is red, blue, yellow, black, and white, which you can probably find for under $1 each. This way you can mix most of the colors you might need. For a palette, I'm just using a paper plate, but normally I like to use disposable sheet palettes. Also make sure that you have at least one small paintbrush handy that doesn't have any frayed bristles. When it comes to painting with acrylics, there are a couple tricks that I've learned over the years. First, you want to make sure that you are blending using wet-on-wet paint. In this case, I've already painted part of the body white, and while that paint is still wet, I will start blending the brown shadows into it. If you try to blend after one of the colors is already dry, you won't be able to get a smooth transition. This can be tricky with acrylics because they dry so fast, so make sure that you are making blending a priority once you've put down colors. Another trick that I've learned is to use water as your mixing medium. Acrylic paint can be hard to get crisp lines with when it is in its purest form, but adding a little water helps to thin it out and not skip as much. You can even add so much water that it starts to behave as watercolor instead if that's a look that you want to go for. Also, make sure that you are taking time when painting. A lot of people get frustrated because they expect to be able to create some masterpiece within a matter of minutes, but painting is a long process that requires patience. Painting a single magnet took me about 45 minutes or more, but if you love the process and you slip into the flow of creating, then it doesn't feel long at all. Many people find painting to be meditative. I certainly find that it is incredibly therapeutic, which is why I spend most of my creative energy towards painting. Don't forget to add highlights and finishing touches because these tiny little details truly bring everything together. Having a good white paint is something that is worth splurging on, and it is consistently the color that I run out of the quickest. Of course, no rat painting would be complete without a bit of pink for the tail, ears, and tiny rat nose. Tails are usually what freak people out about rats, so when painting them, I wanted to depict them as less snake-like and more pink candy cane-like. Don't forget to add little semblances of hair to the body. To keep with the theme of cuteness, I'm opting for pastel backgrounds. Mr. Tickles is getting a pastel purple shade, which I think complements his white fur. Make sure that you paint the sides as well as the back so that no clay is peeking out. Using a darker purple, I'm writing out his name in the empty space underneath him. This was probably the trickiest part, and I had to start over several times. Make sure that the paint is thin enough to write with and that you have enough space for the whole word. Now you're going to repeat this process with your other magnets. Rats get a lot of hate and they are often seen as dirty, diseased, or just plain gross. But rats are really like tiny dogs. They love to cuddle, they can learn tricks, they will follow their humans around, and they're just generally super affectionate. I've been amazed to discover how completely different each of their personalities are, with Tofu acting like a big teddy bear, Mr. Tickles is a total mama's boy, and Caldwell being more of an angsty teenager. They're definitely very spoiled in this household, but it feels nice giving them good lives when many of them are experimented on, seen as pests, or used as reptile fodder. It's the year of the rat after all, so we might as well give them a little bit more respect than usual, right? Painting wrinkles is certainly more time-consuming than just smoothly painting out a body, but I find this level of detail to be much more fun to paint. Try to envision the direction of light, and make sure that all of your wrinkles have shadows and highlights that match one another. This is something that is best executed while looking at a reference photo, but I opted to work from memory, which is why some of my wrinkles are a little bit wonky, but this is okay because I think it adds a little bit of character. Don't stress yourself trying to make everything perfect because the fun is in the process. The more you paint, the better you'll become with time. Once you finish painting, your palette should look like its own abstract piece of art. Now, taking the Mod Podge Dimensional Magic, we're going to cover all of the magnets in a thin layer of this stuff. Make sure that you don't leave any empty spaces. This is why it is best to first create an outline and then fill it in. If there are any air bubbles that form, pop them using a toothpick or other sharp object. This is going to make all of the magnets super shiny, as if we had put a layer of resin over them. I prefer using this method because resin can, first of all, be tricky to work with, and second, it is also capable of causing health problems if used improperly. You'll want to let the magnets dry for several hours, preferably overnight. Avoid touching them too early because you don't want your fingerprints to be transferred in the process. Once they are dry, they should look something like this. Now, taking our magnets and our super glue or hot glue, we're going to place 2 magnets on the back of each piece. Spread the glue onto one side of the magnets and then press it onto the clay. Using 2 magnets helps ensure that the piece won't fall off the fridge or wherever you plan on putting it. Let the glue dry for a half an hour or so, and then you're done. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next week. Stay magical, friends.